The text message arrived while I was standing in formation beneath a blazing Texas sky, my retirement shadowing packet tucked beneath my arm, and a row of soldiers waiting for instructions. My phone vibrated once, then again, then a third time. I glanced down, expecting another logistics update. Instead, I saw my brother's name, Ethan. The same brother who had spent 20 years laughing at every military decision I ever made. The same brother who once told an entire family barbecue that joining the army was what people did when they weren't smart enough for college. The same brother who hadn't called me in almost 8 months. The message contained only 6 words. "I need your signature. Call me." I stared at the screen. For a moment, I honestly thought he had sent it to the wrong person. Then another text arrived. "It's important. Family emergency." Family emergency. Funny how those words always appeared whenever somebody wanted something from me. Never when I was deployed. Never when rockets landed outside our compound in Afghanistan. Never when I missed Christmas for the 7th time. Never when I buried friends. Only when someone needed something. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Across the parade field, young soldiers waited for instructions. The wind rattled nearby flags. And suddenly, I found myself thinking about a day 22 years earlier. The day my brother laughed. The day everything started. My name is Michael Walker. I served 24 years in the United States Army. And this is the story of how the brother who mocked my military career ended up begging for a signature that could save everything he owned, and how I finally stopped rescuing people who never respected me. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business before dinner. My father owned a hardware store, my mother taught elementary school, and my older brother Ethan was the golden child. Some families try to hide favoritism. Mine didn't. Ethan was charismatic, funny, outgoing, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. Teachers loved him, neighbors loved him, girls loved him. By comparison, I was quieter, more disciplined, the kid who actually followed instructions. Dad used to joke that Ethan could sell ice to Eskimos while I would probably write a report about proper freezer maintenance. Everybody laughed, including me. Back then, I thought it was harmless. Looking back now, I realize those little jokes taught everyone exactly where we stood. Ethan was admired, I was useful. There's a difference, and trust me, you feel it. The summer after high school changed everything. It was 2001. I had just signed enlistment papers with the Army. I wasn't running away from home. I wasn't failing. I simply wanted purpose, structure, service, something bigger than myself. The night I told my family, we were sitting around my parents' dining room table. Mom looked nervous. Dad looked surprised. Ethan looked entertained. "You're serious?" he asked. "Yeah. You actually joined the Army?" I nodded. He leaned back, laughing. Not smiling, laughing. The kind of laugh that makes everyone else uncomfortable. "Dude, you know college exists, right?" Dad chuckled. Mom stared at her plate. I felt heat rise into my face. "It's what I want." Ethan shook his head. "No offense, Mike, but that's crazy." "Why?" "Because you're smart." I waited. Then came the line I never forgot. "You don't send smart people into deserts carrying rifles." The room went silent. He laughed again. Nobody corrected him. Nobody defended me. Dad eventually changed the subject. But something shifted inside me that night. Not anger, not yet. Just understanding. I finally saw how my brother viewed me. Not as an equal, not as a man making a choice, as someone settling for less. Then September 11th happened. Everything changed. Suddenly, the Army wasn't a joke anymore. It became real. dangerous, necessary. And while Ethan built a comfortable life in Ohio, I began building one everywhere else. Fort Benning, Fort Hood, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany. Back home, Ethan climbed a corporate ladder. Regional sales, management, real estate investments, nice cars, big house, expensive vacations. Dad couldn't stop bragging about him. Whenever relatives gathered, conversations sounded predictable. Ethan just bought another property. Ethan got promoted again. Ethan's doing incredible. Then somebody would glance at me. So where are you stationed now? That was usually the entire discussion. 20 seconds. Then back to Ethan. Always Ethan. The funny thing is, I didn't resent his success. Not at first. I was proud of him. Genuinely. What hurt wasn't his success. It was the assumption that my sacrifices somehow counted less. I missed birthdays, weddings, funerals, anniversaries, entire years of my life. Yet somehow, my career was treated like an interesting side quest, while Ethan's was treated like the main story. And every time I came home, the pattern repeated. Ethan talked, everybody listened. I listened too, because soldiers learn patience. Sometimes too much patience. Years passed. Deployments stacked on deployments. Promotions came. Leadership responsibilities grew. Eventually, I became the person younger soldiers called when things went wrong. I built a reputation, not for being flashy, for being dependable, reliable, the guy who solved problems. Back home, Ethan developed a reputation too. He was successful, confident, charming, and increasingly careless with money. Nobody noticed at first. Success hides problems, especially when people want to believe the story. The first hint came during Thanksgiving. Dad mentioned Ethan had refinanced his house, then refinanced it again, then borrowed against equity for another investment. Ethan waved it away. That's how rich people build wealth. Everyone nodded. I didn't. Something felt off, but I kept quiet because nobody wanted financial advice from the army guy. A few years later, Mom called. "Can you help your brother?" Those words should have been printed on family stationery. I heard them so often. Apparently, one investment property needed emergency repairs. Ethan was short on cash, just temporarily, always temporarily. I wired $5,000. He promised to pay it back. He never did. I didn't push. Family was family, or so I thought. Then came another request, and another, and another. Different excuses, same result. Each time I helped. Each time gratitude lasted approximately 12 minutes. Then everything returned to normal. The strangest part? Nobody knew. I never told anyone. Not Dad, not Mom, not relatives, certainly not Ethan. Because I wasn't helping for recognition. I was helping because that's what soldiers do. You take care of your people, even when they don't deserve it, especially when they don't deserve it. Eventually, that becomes habit, then identity, then a trap. 5 years before retirement, everything escalated. Dad suffered a minor stroke. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to force him into partial retirement. The hardware store struggled. Bills piled up. Stress mounted. Mom sounded exhausted every time we spoke. So I stepped in, quietly. Again. I covered medical expenses, paid overdue invoices, stabilized payroll during a rough quarter. Nobody knew, except Dad. And even then, he barely acknowledged it. One phone call, one thank you, then silence. Meanwhile, Ethan continued presenting himself as the family success story. Luxury SUV, golf memberships, investment seminars, social media posts about entrepreneurship. The image looked perfect. The reality wasn't. Behind the scenes, debt kept growing. And guess who kept filling holes whenever things collapsed? Me. Always me. The dependable brother. The army brother. the brother who apparently existed to solve problems. Then came the family reunion that changed everything. I had just returned from deployment, tired, older, ready for peace. The reunion took place at a lakeside rental property. Relatives filled every room. Kids ran everywhere. Burgers smoked on the grill. The usual chaos. At some point, conversation shifted toward careers. One cousin asked about retirement. I explained I planned to leave the Army within a few years. Before I could finish speaking, Ethan laughed. The same laugh, the one from 20 years earlier. About time. People smiled politely. I didn't. What does that mean? He shrugged. You've done enough playing soldier. The air changed instantly. Several relatives looked uncomfortable. Ethan kept talking. You could have made real money if you'd gone into business. Nobody spoke. Not Dad, not Mom. Nobody. I sat there, staring at him, and for the first time in my life, I stopped defending myself. I simply smiled, because something inside me had finally changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. 3 months later, I began organizing every financial document connected to my family. Every transfer, every loan, every emergency payment, every guarantee, every bailout, every dollar. The stack became enormous, and as I reviewed years of records, one realization hit me harder than any deployment ever had. My brother didn't think I was successful because he had absolutely no idea how much of his success depended on me. For 3 days, I ignored Ethan's messages. Not because I was angry, because I already knew how the story ended. Every family crisis followed the same pattern. Ethan made a bad decision, everyone panicked, then somebody called me, usually with the expectation that I'd quietly fix everything. This time felt different. The messages kept coming. The calls became more frequent. Even Mom started reaching out. Please call your brother. He sounds scared. He says it's serious. Scared. That word got my attention because Ethan wasn't the kind of person who got scared. Arrogant? Sure. Cocky? Absolutely. Scared? Never. On the 4th day, I finally called. He answered before the first ring finished. Mike? His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. What's going on? Long silence. Then he said 4 words that changed everything. I need your signature. There it was again. The signature. I leaned back in my office chair. What signature? Another pause. Then I heard him exhale. The commercial property. My stomach tightened immediately, because suddenly I knew exactly what he was talking about. 5 years earlier, Ethan had convinced me to co-sign a commercial development project, not because he lacked confidence, because lenders required additional guarantees. At the time, Dad begged me. It's just paperwork. Nothing will happen. Ethan's got this. Against my better judgment, I signed. Mostly for Dad, not Ethan. Dad promised I'd never hear about it again. Turns out that was a lie. A very expensive lie. What's happening? I asked. Silence. Then, the project's failing. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. The development looked shaky from day one. Too much debt, too much optimism, not enough reality. But every time I raised concerns, Ethan called me negative. Now, reality had arrived, and reality always collects. The next morning, I flew home, not because I intended to help, because I wanted answers. The meeting took place at a law office downtown. When I arrived, everyone was already there. Dad, Mom, Ethan, 2 attorneys, a banker. The atmosphere felt like a funeral. Nobody smiled, nobody joked. Even Ethan looked exhausted. For the first time in my life, he seemed genuinely defeated. The banker slid several documents across the table. Mr. Walker. I nodded. Without your signature, restructuring isn't possible. I studied the paperwork. Then my stomach dropped. The numbers were staggering. Millions. Not thousands. Millions. The project wasn't struggling, it was collapsing. I looked directly at Ethan. How bad is it? Nobody answered. The banker finally cleared his throat. If immediate action isn't taken, he stopped, then continued carefully. There could be personal exposure. Personal exposure. Corporate language for disaster. The room felt suddenly smaller. I turned another page, then another, and another. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Questionable loans, aggressive refinancing, multiple hidden liabilities, some of which nobody had disclosed to me, including Ethan. Then came the moment everything changed. I looked at one specific document, then looked again. Surely I had misread it. I hadn't. My name appeared repeatedly. Not as a cosigner, not as secondary support, as primary guarantor. My blood ran cold. I looked directly at the attorney. What is this? The room went silent. Nobody spoke. Not Ethan, not Dad. Nobody. The attorney shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Walker. I stood. What is this? This time, louder. Dad looked away, and suddenly, I understood. They knew. Every one of them. Ethan finally spoke. We were going to tell you. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled everyone. Because it wasn't amusement, it was disbelief. You were going to tell me? Nobody answered. I looked down at the documents again, then back at my family. For 20 years, I had been the responsible one, the dependable one, the problem solver. And somehow that had turned into permission. Permission to use me. Permission to risk my future. Permission to assume I'd always save them. Then Ethan said something I'll never forget. We thought you'd understand. Understand. That word. The same word Dad used every time they chose Ethan. The same word they used whenever sacrifice came from me. I sat down slowly. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then I asked a simple question. When were you planning to tell me? Nobody answered, because there wasn't a good answer, only the truth. They never intended to tell me, not until they needed something. Again. The banker slid a pen toward me. Mr. Walker. I looked at it. A simple pen, one signature, one decision, one moment. The kind of moment people spend years imagining. For 20 years, I'd rescued everyone. Every crisis, every emergency, every disaster. I always signed, always paid, always fixed things. But this time felt different, because for the first time, I understood the cost. Not money, respect. Every bailout taught them I would always save them. Every rescue convinced them accountability was optional. And every sacrifice made me less visible, not more. I pushed the pen back. The room froze. The banker blinked. Dad stared. Mom looked terrified. Ethan went pale. What are you doing? Dad asked. I looked at him calmly. What should have happened years ago. Silence. Then I stood. I'm done. Chaos erupted immediately. Dad started talking, Mom started crying, Ethan started pleading, the attorneys exchanged nervous looks, but I barely heard any of it, because something inside me had become incredibly calm. The kind of calm soldiers develop after surviving enough storms. The kind of calm that arrives when a decision is finally made. Ethan followed me into the parking lot. Mike, wait. I kept walking. Please. I stopped, turned around, and for the first time in 20 years, my brother looked afraid. Not embarrassed, not frustrated, afraid. I need your help. His voice cracked. I studied him carefully, then asked a question. One simple question. Why? He looked confused. Because we're family. I almost smiled. Family. Funny how that word only appeared when someone wanted something. Not when they laughed, not when they judged, not when they dismissed 24 years of service, only when they needed saving. 3 months later, the project collapsed. Properties were sold, investors walked away, the illusion disappeared, and with it went the version of Ethan everyone believed in, the golden child, the genius entrepreneur, the success story. For the first time in his life, he had to face consequences, real consequences, without me standing between him and reality. Dad called frequently after that. At first, he was angry, then disappointed, then quiet, because eventually he discovered something painful. I hadn't ruined Ethan. I had simply stopped protecting him. There's a difference, a huge difference. 6 months later, Dad showed up at my house, alone, older, tired, smaller somehow. We sat on the back porch watching the sunset. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Dad finally said it. "We leaned on you too much." I stared at the horizon, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, because we both knew it was true. Then he added something unexpected. "And we appreciated you too little." That one hit harder, because it was the first honest thing I'd heard in years. A few weeks later, Ethan called, not asking for money, not asking for signatures, not asking for rescue, just calling, for the first time ever. We talked for almost an hour. Near the end, he became quiet, then said something I never expected. "I was jealous." I frowned. "Of what?" His laugh sounded tired. "You?" That surprised me. Apparently, while I spent years envying the attention he received, he spent years envying the respect I'd earned, the purpose, the discipline, the life. Funny how perspective works. Before hanging up, he said one final thing. "I should have been proud of you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I smiled. "Maybe next time, just show up." He laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in years. Today, the documents from that project sit in a box in my garage. A reminder, not of betrayal, of boundaries. Because the biggest lesson I learned wasn't financial, it was personal. Helping people isn't wrong, sacrifice isn't wrong, loyalty isn't wrong. But when helping becomes expected, and sacrifice becomes invisible, and loyalty only flows one direction, something has to change. For me, that change started with one signature. The signature I finally refused to give. And strangely enough, that was the moment my family finally started seeing me, not as the dependable brother, not as the army guy, not as the fixer, just as Michael. And after all those years, that was enough. The end.